Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Super Wednesday, the final day of MBA Spotlight here at GMAT Club 2021. We're continuing things as we move forward after listening to the folks at HEC Paris. We are now here with the wonderful John Lee from UCLA Anderson. I'm very excited and looking forward to seeing his presentation. I just met him 10 minutes ago, and he's a fantastic person to converse with, so I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of fun. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to John. Right before I do, I want to let you guys know to please like and subscribe GMAT Club if you haven't already. One thing I know for sure is that if you do and you haven't liked and subscribed already, you will get 7-day access to GMAT Club tests. So definitely take advantage of that if you haven't already. And with that, we'll hand it over to John.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So thank you everyone for joining us today. As mentioned, my name is John Lee. I'm one of the Associate Doctors of Admissions for the full-time MBA program, and actually joined by my colleague, Alana Van Allen, who was an alumna of the program and now works with us, and she will be on the chat. So feel free to, if you have questions during my presentations, feel free to put them on there. So with that being said, let's get this started because I want to make sure that I get through this and we have enough room and time for your questions. So to introduce you to Anderson, first let me speak to you about our 3 core values. Right now, you're doing a lot of MBA research, and you're going to see that a lot of schools are pretty different in terms of culture, what they're about. So for us, it comes down to these 3 things. They are shared success, in which our MBA degree fosters collaboration and working towards bigger and better goals. Thinking fearlessly, our MBA encourages breaking the mold and not selling for status quo. And then finally, driving change. At the end of the day, our students just want to leave the program better for the next generation of students, because knowing that our culture is highly collaborative, it also leads to a lot of just generative type of values and knowing that there's this paying it forward mentality in the future. So now that you know a little bit about us, let's talk about UCLA Anderson and how we can help you. Your career preparation journey is going to be instrumental, and it actually begins with our Parker Career Management Center. So our Parker Career Management Center, also known as Parker or Parker CMC, is top ranked amongst other top business schools, according to both The Economist and Bloomberg Businessweek on student satisfaction. So Parker provides student support in a 3-pronged approach. The first being planning, which includes your interest assessment, career counseling, and workshops. Then the implementation phase, which is things like mock interviews, on-campus recruiting, and finally an assessment, which will help you make your offer decision in terms of negotiating salaries and future career planning. Parker also offers an amazing array of resources, some of which you can see are listed here, such as the Parker Career Series, which is a course taken in the first quarter to prep for recruiting season. It'll touch upon things like resume writing, networking, interviewing, and negotiating. The ACT teams are basically first-year students group with second-year mentors that have gone through the recruiting in terms of industry or function, and they meet with you weekly to make sure you stay the course during your recruiting. Examples of ACT teams include human resources, consulting, banking, retail, social impact, you name it, there's likely one for you. One-on-one career advising. We are very high touch, high contact. So the average student will have about 40 hours of one-on-one career advising with their specific advisor. Days on the jobs. These are typically offered by clubs, and they are treks to different companies. And finally, the Parker portal, which will have an extensive listing of of jobs for Anderson students and customer career guides and free access to things like the Bloomberg portal. So you see here a snapshot of our class of 2020 employment. Our top industries you'll see are tech, consulting, and finance, right? But no, in addition to that, we also have students who go into all these different industries, and that's what really makes Anderson so great and diverse. We intentionally do this to not try to build a class of just one type of people, because we feel it's important to have diversity and interests, and given our student career options. We also have resources to help you in your career journey, regardless of the industry that you are pursuing. Even if you're pursuing a niche career goal, the Parker Career Management Center will help you get to your goals. So one of the fun facts that I want to mention is that 150 plus companies participate on-campus recruiting, and then also 1,000 or more jobs are posted in the Parker portal each year. So this is just actually a snapshot of companies that actually come onto campus. Students have a diverse range of career interests, as you saw earlier. In addition to large multinational companies, that are mostly represented in this slide. Many are also pursuing careers at small and mid-sized companies and startups as well. So we strongly recommend that you go into the career site and actually download the employment report so you can see where our students are going post-MBA. And one of the things that we really don't talk about enough is the value proposition of our location being Los Angeles, right? So when we like to think about LA, we like to think of it as limitless access. You are coming into the 16th largest economy that pretty much has all industries. I know a lot of people think of us as an entertainment town, but we have consulting, we have banking, we have healthcare that's really booming right now. We have small startups that are all along Silicon Beach. We have your traditionals and non-traditional CPGs as well. And then we're also a really diverse town of 140 countries represented in 86 different languages, and then also 300,000 small entrepreneurial businesses. Why is this important? Well, there's just a couple benefits. Because of all this access in the city, you are able to conduct information interviews and network face-to-face with many of the top executives who come onto campus and are situated in the West Coast. You have the ability to pursue more than one internship. About 47% of our students do academic internships, which are just internships during the school year. So you can leave Anderson having additional experience on top of your summer internship. And finally, our location also means that industry leaders and executives can easily come onto campus or even guest lecture for a class or for a full quarter. So to support you further in your career, UCLA Anderson also has a strong network of 41,000 alumni across the globe, including the ones that you see featured here. As an alum, you'll have access to career services, career service support, alumni through the Alumni Career Services Office. You'll be able to connect with your classmates through our worldwide welcome weeks that the Alumni Relation Office held every year across different countries. So the network is definitely there and very strong. And depending on where you are, there's also 40 plus chapters that you'll be able to engage with. So now let's talk about your curriculum after having just finished talking about your career journey. So the first year actually begins in the summertime. We start with onboarding. And the reason why we do this is because we want you to be able to just kind of be by yourselves as a cohort and to get to know one another, but also prepare for recruiting. So onboarding starts around the first week of August. And it's really critical because at that time, you're taking a couple classes, but you're also preparing for things like consulting and banking recruiting because it does start right away. And then you'll slowly then move through the rest of your core courses in that first year. But once you hit the spring quarter, it becomes highly flexible and customizable for you. You'll see that you can take a bunch of optional electives and also probably take on an academic internship. And this is one of the benefits of having a quarter system is that you get to take many more classes to meet the needs of your interests. And then you'll see that in the second year schedule, that is pretty much all electives. So you'll be able to take whatever you want. And one of the great things about being a part of UCLA, which I'll touch upon later as well, is that you get to take 3 classes outside of the business school to add on to your MBA degree. So at Anderson, we allow our students to customize and craft their curriculum, as I mentioned. So as you start thinking about electives based on your career interests, these specializations are here to provide you with roadmaps. They are not required, but each specialization will have 4 to 6 recommended courses for you to take. Most students will have at least 1. Some will take 2. It's really rare that no one actually has a specialization, just because, we were to give you 115 elective courses, you probably wouldn't even know where to begin. So it's just really, again, a roadmap for you as you map out your academic journey with us. So you'll see that the capstone project is kind of the highlight of your second year. And there are typically two main ways that students do our capstone project. The first is the Applied Management Research, or AMR, which has about 70% of the students forming teams to tackle a 20-week field study project with a real organizations. And these organizations range from Fortune 500 companies to small to social impact organizations to SMEs. And what you're supposed to do is you help them solve a key strategic issue. So you are a consultant working with a client to meet their business needs, to help solve their problem and meet their business needs. There's also an international option too, which I will touch upon later when we talk about the international requirement. The second way that most students do it is actually the BCO. About 20% of the class, and it has been growing, so it's probably more like around 30% of the class now, usually participates in this. And we highly recommend it if you ever want to start your own business or get startup experience by helping a classmate launch their business. So just some capstone examples. To the left, you'll see an AT&T one where the project focused on the strategic plan for AT&T and DirecTV's new streaming services. The second one is K-pop Sauce, from a class of 2017 alum who launched their flagship product from his grandma's recipe, and is now actually doing really well in a couple of the boutique supermarkets here in the Los Angeles area. And finally, the last one is actually an international AMR. This is an example of a nonprofit project that was also included the international travel to Africa, where a team examined how to best support communal farmers to implement better management that reduces farming impact on nature. So in addition to the capstone project, as I mentioned prior, the international requirement is something that we want all our students to have just because business is getting so global now. And there are three ways that you meet this international requirement. The first is through the capstone project, for example, going to Africa to look at that conservation efforts. The second one is just to take an international elective. This is typically the easiest way to do it. That's at lowest cost. And it's just taking a class that has a global component to it. And finally, we have global immersions. This is learning about a country for about 6 weeks, such as Peru, China, India, Japan, for example, and then spending a week on site with professors, meeting different organizations. And finally, another way that you get international exposure, but it does not count towards international requirements, are student-led trips. We had to unfortunately have a halt on student-led trips this past year, but in prior years and hopefully in future years, our students do coordinate a lot of trips during spring break and over the summer, such as the trip to Germany before school starts up again for second years, and then during the first year for spring break, a lot of students will go to Japan or Israel based on how the clubs plan those trips. So I think, the biggest part of business school really is finding your fit. And, the career and academics are important, but you'll hear Adcoms talk about this a lot. So what does that really mean when we say you want to find your fit? The first is just that the UCLA Anderson culture is very collaborative, right? And students come together to support each other in many ways outside of the classroom. And the first way is really through our clubs. We have over 50 clubs on campus that cover professional, identity, interests, athletics, and even our student government. So there's abundance of ways you can take on leadership roles in your first year and your second year. And an industry conference. Much of the activity at UCLA Anderson are driven by students, including the many conferences held on campus, such as our Create Conference, which is with the Entrepreneur Association, the Think Conference with our Investment Finance Association, Pulse is our conference for media entertainment, and lastly, Evolve with the Retail Business Association. Case competition is also another way for students to gain practical experience and exposure, where you can potentially win prize money. We also have a big volunteering culture here on campus. Challenger Charity is actually one of the biggest groups on campus for our students, where we have this giving back mentality, and every year we go to Stanford to compete for the Challenger Charity Cup, which comprises of community service hours, fundraising dollars, and also just fun sports competitions. Then we have Dean Speaker Series, and finally student government, which I touched upon earlier. They are kind of the key to your experience here at Anderson. They are the ones that will make a lot of the decisions in terms of what your academics look like, in terms of where new clubs and how they can interact with the student body in many different ways. And then here are some of our partners that help us foster a diverse and inclusive environment at UCLA Anderson. On your left, you'll find external partners, such as our Consortium for Graduate Management Studying Management, the Forte Foundation for Women, and Management Leadership for Tomorrow. We highly encourage prospective students to look into these organizations, as many have pre-MBA programming and resources. And then on our right, you'll see our on-campus clubs that provide professional and personal support for both identifying members and allies. So as an Anderson student, you are not only joining the MBA community, but you're also joining the UCLA family. So UCLA is a global brand that attracts the best talent from around the world. We have over 290 research centers. For the 10th or 11th, maybe even longer year in a row now, we've been the most popular college in the US in terms of application. For those of you who have not experienced big athletic culture before, we are Division I sports with 119 or maybe even more now NCAA titles and counting. And again, in terms of academics, you'll have the access to UCLA courses and joint degree programs within the university. So if you'd like to join our community, here are a couple key things you need to know about applying to Anderson. So we had 3 rounds for application deadlines, and applicants typically ask, which is the best time to apply? And the answer is apply when your application is at its strongest. And even if you have to wait until round 2 or round 3, just to kind of give you an understanding of the rounds, round 1 and 2 are typically level playing fields. So we don't really see any advantages or disadvantages one way or another. But round 3 is where it'll get more competitive. It's still a good time to apply, but selectivity will increase because we are filling up seats with admits from the previous rounds. And our application for those who are interested will go live on August 1st. So let's take a deeper dive into the actual application. So academics and test scores are important to evaluate your potential for success in the classroom. The TOEFL and IELTS are going to be required for all international students unless you went to undergrad in an English-speaking country such as the US or the UK. And then we don't actually have a preference in terms of whether you take the GMAT or the GRE. Either one is fine. Take the test that you're most comfortable with. We don't have many students taking the GRE though, so you'll see that later when I pull up the slide on averages, you'll only see the GMAT average. But what we do is we convert the GRE into the GMAT score. And I want to say the most critical part of the application process really is the essay section, just because it really does allow you to distinguish yourself with a compelling plan that shows that you did your homework on yourself, the power of an MBA, the details of our school, and your post-MBA career goals, short and long term. And then your resume gives us an overview of your academic and career history, and it can allow you to highlight key accomplishments to tell your journey. In terms of recommendations, we do understand that a lot of students won't be able to get or won't feel comfortable getting recommendations from current supervisors. That is actually not required. We just do hope that you are able to give us recommendations from 2 professional sources that will speak very highly of you and can talk about, accomplishments that you did at work, or how you work in teams and areas of improvements, or how the MBA will eventually benefit you. And finally, the interview is by invitation only. And they are conducted by our second-year students. So it's more of a fit interview to make sure that you will align with our culture versus anything else. So overall, everything is evaluated within a holistic context, and we look at every application for your potential, both academic and through management. So we look at every part of the application. In terms of academics, we are looking at academic potential because our program is rigorous, especially the first year core, which is highly quantitative, right? So in that section, we are looking at data points such as undergraduate performance and test scores. Activities is your contribution potential. Since being an active member at UCLA Anderson is very vital to us. So data points will include undergraduate activities, post-undergraduate activities, your essay, your resume, your interview. Career, we look at the data points of your career history, resume, recommendations, essay, and interviews. And finally, the overall fit would be, your essays and your interviews and your recommendations. So ultimately, we have a holistic review of your entire application file. So here's a snapshot of the class of 2023. So the class that is just coming in now, in about a month, it's actually when this class will come onto campus. Again, you'll see that our application is very holistic. And if you see yourself outside of these ranges, do not fret as we look at everything you would bring to the table. So in terms of class size, we feel that 360 is actually large enough to bring diversity of perspectives into the classroom, but actually small enough that you'll get to know pretty much all of your classmates. And we are really proud of our strong diversity numbers. We have over 41 countries represented. We have 42% women and 36% international students ranging across 202 different undergraduate institutions. So you're going to meet many different types of people. You'll see that the average work experience is 5 years. And again, your academic profile on the right-hand side. So fellowships and funding your MBA. So fellowships are based on the overall strength of your application. So you do not need to submit any additional documents. The admissions committee will be able, and financial aid office will be able to determine eligibility based on your applicant profile. Usually the top third of the class receive a fellowships that ranges anywhere from $20,000 to full tuition. The average fellowship is about $36,000. International student loans are also, with or without co-signers, are also available. And eventually, when you're on campus, you'll have opportunities to access research and teaching assistantships. And again, academic internships that will kind of help you in terms of cost of an MBA. So there are many additional ways to continue to learn more about Anderson. And these are just some of the ways that you can. So you can meet with some of our students virtually now. They're hosting coffee chats throughout the entire summer. And then we're also having Adcom office hours. And then you can read more about us through our website, our MBA Insider blog, social media posts, brochure, and employment report that I alluded to earlier. We are still going to be able to have webinars throughout this entire summer and live guide presentations. So definitely check us out with that. They are going to start as early as mid-July, and they are going to be region specific. So depending on where you are, there will be a webinar for Greater China region, Korea, Japan, for example, also Latin America. We also have a bunch of US ones. And then finally, once we are able to, again, we would love for you to visit our campus where you can come for a school tour, observe a class, and also sit in on some campus presentations. Again, that is probably not likely though until January 2022. So a lot of what you'll be doing is going to be virtual at the moment. And that's the end of our presentation, and happy to take questions and answer. Okay. And I guess I'll stop sharing now.
Yes, fantastic. John, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm sure there's questions here. Before I jump into the questions, I just want to remind you that the folks over at UCLA Anderson, I think, John, you'll be part of that as well. We'll have a Zoom session at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I've included the link right there for those who want to join and get more information. So do check that out if you have more questions to ask after this presentation. Okay, so let's get started with some of the questions. I think you've already answered, one of the most popular questions we get, which is there a difference between round one and round two? And really, from what I remember you saying, is that it's not that there's a difference. It's just once we get into round three, there's just a little bit more of that competition, the competitiveness. Obviously the places are being filled up. Would that be correct?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of studies on this and looking at different data points in previous years. And round one and round two really is a level playing field. Round three is the competition, where seats are filled up from round one and round two. And typically we only have about maybe 20 slots left by the time round three comes around. So it's not that the metrics got bigger, right? It's not that they got harder. It wasn't all of a sudden like we were only looking at 780 GMATs, right? Because that's not true. It was just more so there's only 20 spots left, a couple hundred applications, where your chances just become less at that point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes sense. It's just a standard protocol, right? If you're going to apply towards the end, you just are going to face that much more competition. So that makes a lot of sense. Quite a lot of international applicants will ask this question, especially because they're coming from international places and spots. UCLA is in a very competitive place as it is for American MBAs. What would you say, in your opinion, is that sweet spot, or maybe that one word that you would describe UCLA that just differentiates it from all the other American B schools out there that people are considering?
Yeah, I think the one word I would say is just friendly. UCLA is a very, I think it touches upon our culture in terms of how collaborative we are, how friendly we are, how inclusive we are as a community. We're very welcoming to UCLA, to international students. It's probably a combination of both, just the fact that we're in California, we're a more liberal state, we're a sanctuary state, right? Even so in that kind of sense. So our students love it. Our students will say that they learn, our domestic students especially will say that they learn a lot from their international counterparts. And there's so much value because they bring in this perspective to the classroom. That is now where business is now global, right? So you wouldn't really be, it would be a disservice if you're not taking the overview and the lived experiences of international students, because they're able to tell you something that you would never get out. You will never get on your own without having interacted with them and have a broader view understanding of how a business context from a globalization standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, keeping with the international theme, a lot of international applicants generally come with a little bit more experience and tend to be on the older side. And for some of them, they may even decide that they won't apply because they know that the typical MBA profile in the United States is definitely on the younger side. What would you say to individuals who are considering but are worried about their age, and maybe some comments on the percentage of older applicants at UCLA?
Yeah, I would say this is a great question, because I think there's this perception out there that we don't like older students, or that we look at your age. And it's not that we look at your age or your work experience. I mean, we do look at your work experience. That's highly critical in terms of recruiting standpoint. Your age, not so much. We understand that there are a lot of non-traditional students out there that may have started undergrad later, or it wasn't as linear from point A to point B. They might be coming from different places where they are having a more work experience, and now it's really time to make that career pivot. So I think the big thing is that whether you're early career, late career, or even if you're in our sweet spot of 5 years, you always still have to address the why now piece of the application, right? Why the MBA makes sense for you at this point in time. And that's what they really have to think about. You have to really take time to reflect and think about that a lot more, especially as an older candidate, because there's a lot more intricacies that come into play with being an older candidate. You have more experience, so you probably are making a lot more money than the typical average MBA that's coming out of a program, right? MBAs typically go into an associate level type job. So you have to wonder, okay, am I going to be okay if I'm making this career transition to backtrack? And if everything says, if the answer is yes to everything, then you are a strong fit. So we're not really looking at age per se. Like, we're not saying like, oh, if you're 40, you shouldn't apply. You should definitely still apply. I think the average age, the age range this year actually goes up to 40. I think it's like 23 to 40. So we do have students that are in the tails, if we were to look at it from in a way of a bell curve. But it really is why now, like why the MBA now makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, and I think if someone has that convincing story and they're convinced themselves, right? So they're not just kind of applying for the sake of it, but they have a very specific goal, then why not? What's to stop you from applying? So that makes a lot of sense. Quickly switching gears now to the GMAT. There'll be a lot of questions about the GMAT. So if you can summarize how UCLA looks at the GMAT, both as a factor in applications and the kind of the quant and verbal scores you're looking for, if IR makes a difference, and how candidates can either account for a poor GPA with a high GMAT or a high GPA with a poor GMAT. If you could comment on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think the most simplistic way of saying this is that, you can have a high GMAT and a low GPA. You can have a lower GMAT and a high GPA, but you definitely cannot have a low GMAT and a low GPA. That's almost kind of not good. I mean, I don't want to say it's not possible to get admissions, but you're at a disadvantage where the rest of your application almost has to be flawless in that sense. But with that being said, the GMAT is just one data point, and we look at it for many different things, right? Just because it does kind of level. It's a level set for us, right? It provides it provides everyone, because it is a requirement for everyone. Everyone has to take it, and it's the one data point where everyone has the same, I guess, I don't want to say advantage, because I think that goes into like a whole like social, political thing, but everyone has to take the same test, right? Whereas not everyone had the same career background, not everyone has the same undergraduate preparation, right? right? So it's the one piece that is almost a level playing field.
It's a standardized test that everyone's got to take around the world.
Yeah. Exactly. So we look at it that way. We also look at it from a quantitative standpoint. So we, because everyone is coming from different majors, for example, engineering, the liberal arts and sciences, the humanities, it gives us a good understanding and a good gauge on whether or not you can meet the academic rigor. So the reason why we look for that is because UCLA Anderson's core is highly quantitative, right? It starts off with financial accounting, moves right into statistics and finance. So if you're not going to have a good understanding of those concepts, where there are going to be, it's not going to be a lot of calculus per se, but there is going to be a higher level math than what a lot of people are used to doing, and concepts, you're not going to really succeed too well in our program. So we look at it from that point. But with that being said, we have other areas that we look at. So if you have a low GMAT score, we'll look for the quant in your academic preparation, your undergraduate scores. We can look for it in your resume too, because a lot of people probably do some type of data analysis in their day-to-day work. So those are just some of the areas that we look at when we look at and how we leverage the GMAT score. In terms of verbal, I don't know that there has. I think from my experience, most people do very well in the verbal, so it's almost kind of like a non-factor at that point for us. It really is going to be heavier on the quant side. Same thing with IR. People typically do really well. Those are not the areas of concern that we will really look at. Now, of course, if you score low and your essays are also kind of messy in terms of writing and structure, then there might be something there that might be a red flag. But for the most part, those are not, I guess, the barriers for a lot of people to have to overcome.
Great. Yeah, that's very detailed, and I think a lot of people will take value from that and really keep that in mind as they're applying. Moving on, sort of with more of the profile, when they're applying, how much importance or weight does UCLA give to rewards, recognitions, extracurricular activities during the profile selection? Is that something that people should really highlight?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question, just because I think people think of it differently. I think for us, we value it a lot more than maybe some of the other schools will, just because we are such a highly collaborative environment and we rely so much on students to really drive the impact and the value for their fellow classmates, with the Anderson MBA. So we do like to see people who are leaders, who have been leaders or have leadership potential. But in terms of how you highlight that, though, I will say that, and this always gets, that people always think of it as if I do more, it'll show that I'm gonna be the right student for you. But it's actually not quantity, it's quality, right? So we don't need to see you list 20 things that you have done since your undergrad years. We want to know that your sometimes people have 3 really key things that they really hone in on, right? They were president of some club or a vice president of some club. They have done a lot of community service, right? Where they just put hours and hours within this one organization. And then they're in their ERG groups of their respective companies, right? Where they are trying to make a difference. So, and those are just 3. And we will see the impact of those 3 versus, oh, I was in this club and that club, and I was a member here and there, and I did this and this and that, and I do all these things, where there's really no value to it because you're just doing it, and we don't really know what kind of impact you really made. So think quality over quantity when it comes to extracurricular and rewards that you're giving, that you're highlighting.
Great. One question that of course with the international candidates comes a lot is conversion of their GPA, that country's GPA to US GPA, because it's a big, I know for myself, I'm from Canada, we don't even use GPA from my university, we use the percent grade. So I'm sure the Adcoms have seen, applicants from around the world, but if you could just comment on how they take that into account when evaluating a person's GPA.
Yeah, so luckily we do not actually convert GPA. So we do not take a score and like a 10-point score and turn it into a 4.0. We actually have, so UCLA has a graduate division that, oversees pretty much, they're the umbrella of all the graduate programs. So they actually have a good understanding of each country. So you're basically going to be judged upon your country's scale. So, I think India might be a 10.0 scale, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll look at, what that is, right? So, 8.0 might be the level that is needed to be considered what would traditionally be a B, for example. So we'll look at it that way. Same thing with Canada. I think they go to 100. So we'll look at we're 80. So we're actually guided by what the graduate division tells us, and you're judged within your own country. So we know that someone who went to University of Toronto, we're not going to judge them with someone who went to, say, like, University of Virginia, right? Because it'll be all the Canadian applicants within that, and then where their academics are within that country. So you're looking at that. Right.
No, and that's a great point. I think people are always worried about, what will my GPA look when it's converted to US? It may not make sense, but I think we have to remember that this is not the first year MBA programs have started. These, obviously, Adcoms have seen applications, for decades, and so they should be fairly comfortable with everyone's GPA scale. Great. So let's talk a little bit about employment, because obviously, people are going to have questions about employment post MBA. One question that people have asked is, beyond the United States, how easy or hard is it for an Anderson grad to seek employment outside the US? Does Anderson have a strong profile from an international perspective when it comes to job prospects?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. It's one of those questions where I can't tell if we're great or the students are great. Maybe it's a combination of both. But I just think that I have not heard of international students who wanted to go international having a hard time landing something internationally. Like, I've actually seen almost like 100% success rate in terms of that, right? But so that's why I'm like, oh, is it us? Is it them? Is it a combination? But there are going to be resources for you. Obviously, if you are looking to do international recruiting, the scaffolding and the structure will not be there for you the same way that doing on-campus recruiting will be, right? I think the student has to want that, and they have to almost be super driven to pursue it on their own with the guidance of the Parker Career Management Center. So we do have an international advisor that will work with you. We will have people that will do the interview prep with you. We will have the people that will do all the resume guidance and making sure that everything is done nicely so you present yourself in the best light forward. But I think with international, it's going to have to be more of like, okay, this is where I'm going to have to put my best foot forward, hustle a little bit more, because I don't have the support structure in a way that is as linear as on-campus recruiting. But again, I actually have seen really successful people international in terms of not just internships, but also full-time recruiting. So if students who are interested in MBB, for example, I've seen them go into different offices in Singapore and Shanghai. Students who are going to want to go into the more of the country-specific companies. I've seen people go into Shopee, for example, which is the e-commerce in Singapore and Taiwan. So it does happen. I want to say I've never seen someone who wanted it and not get it.
Right. Great. So UCLA will be hosting classes on campus, if I'm not mistaken, as of September, correct?
Yes, we will. We're actually going to be hosting students on campus. I believe that right now it's going to be 80% capacity for summer. So they start in the summertime. First years come August 2nd, so about a month from now. So we're going to be at 80% capacity. We're going to, hopefully, with the guidance of California, we can get to 100. I think we're very optimistic just because we've done so well and have been so conservative in the past year and a half. Because we actually were one of the few schools that actually had a completely virtual year. Like there were no classes on campus, with the exception of a few students here and there. But for the most part, we are looking to get back to a return to normal.
Okay, great. And if for those who are currently living in Los Angeles, is there an opportunity to visit the class later this year? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so we don't foresee that happening in terms of visitors coming onto campus, just because if we are still limiting it to 80% capacity, it would be really unfair to allow people to visit campus to take away a seat from someone who's actually enrolled in that class. So, so we think that the on-campus visitation will likely happen in January 2022, but for the remainder of fall 2021, it's still very much going to be controlling the population within the UCLA ecosystem.
Great. A question that comes up a lot is about non-traditional candidates, right? So you've got candidates who are entrepreneurs, candidates who work in liberal arts and humanities and sciences. What recommendations would you give those non-traditional candidates when they're considering to apply to UCLA? Just for your own benefit, I'm a healthcare entrepreneur, so I'm a totally non-traditional candidate, as they would say, right? So for someone like me, what are some of those recommendations?
Yeah, I would say just apply. I think people have this perception that you have to come from a business background to get an MBA, and most people don't. I mean, yeah, like you'll see people coming from consulting and banking and finance, but you're at Anderson, at least you're going to see a lot coming from the nonprofit space, the small startup space, the entrepreneur space. There, and then it's a great way for you to gain business exposure, but also to make a career pivot. So if you decide that nonprofit is no longer something you want to do, or you want to try something different, where you want to look at it from more of a corporate sustainability angle, then business school is right for you. So I think it meets the needs of everyone, and depending on what your goals are, you'll be valued. And because we do value different perspectives and what you bring to the classroom, because that's what an MBA is, right? Learning from your peers. Otherwise, if we had a whole bunch of bankers, for example, you're not really going to get anything. You're not going to get any value added to it, right? So for us, we actually welcome non-traditional students. We value their opinions, and we're just highly inclusive of them and their career goals. And for most places, like most output companies or industries like consulting, they love like almost anyone from various backgrounds. So I think depending what your goals are, there's a place for you in business school.
Great. And then of course you can always specialize some aspects of your MBA while you're in the MBA program, something you have an interest in, or you want to work with the career guidance folks to maybe identify an industry that you want to work with. You want to stay in healthcare, or you want to move to a different industry. There's all these resources that you can take advantage of once you're in the program as well.
Correct. Yeah. And just to kind of note, if you are someone that is looking into switching careers in terms of industry or function, I know a lot of people think that they're one of the few people who are doing it, and you're not. Actually, I think if you're not looking to do it, you're more on the outside looking in than you are, So, in any given year for us, about 85 to 90% of students actually pivot industry or function, and then about 60% actually pivot both. So you are not alone if you think that you're on this journey to do a career change. You are more likely going to be the pretty average student that comes to Anderson, or even an MBA in general, in wanting that kind of change.
Great. So we have time for maybe one more question, and I'll make it a bit of a fun question. What can UCLA admits look forward to outside of school when it comes to the MBA experience, right? So what kind of extracurricular activities are out there? You mentioned, the NCAA, but really, how do they make the most of their experience outside of the actual study?
Yeah, I will say this. And I'm actually in New York right now because I grew up here. So, and I did a couple coffee chats in person, which was kind of fun being able to talk to people in 3D.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always get this question in New York, or even along the East Coast, which is like, can I make it back to New York if I was to come to Anderson? Quick answer is yes, you can. People do make the pivot back to New York. Do they do it? No. They don't, because there's something about Los Angeles that sucks you in. Like there's something about it where you say you're going to come for 2 years, and then all of a sudden something gets you, whether it's the life that you're living that's just very carefree and happy and sunny all day, or you just realize that you never care about winter anymore. You're just go, wow, this is not really for me. So I think, one of the great things that people don't see is that LA has so many benefits. Just being able to live in LA, just the diversity of people that you meet, the things that you can do. You can really go hiking, and, you can go snowboarding and go to the beach on the same day. Like that doesn't happen in many places. You can't really do that. So there's just a lot, I think, in terms of just living. It's just a great place to live. Then obviously, I think for me, I'm a big entertainment junkie. So for me, a celebrity sighting is the most amazing thing in the world for me, right? So I think that's also something that if that's something you want to lean on, that will give you that kind of exposure, or at least those opportunities. So I think the being able to live in LA, whether you do it for 2 years and leave, it's an experience that everyone should have to come to a completely different coast and understand a different way of life.
Yeah, and I think that last point is really funny. When I went to LA myself, I think it was 3-4 years ago. We were in Beverly Hills and Venice Beach, and within the span of, I think, 24 hours, I saw David Spade, I saw Anna Kendrick, and I saw Adrian Brody, and I was just like, and they're just living their normal life. You know what I mean? Like they're out for a dinner or they're walking across the street. And it's such an interesting experience that it's very hard to see that happen anywhere else, certainly in the United States, but anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's true what they say. The stars are just like us. They go to Trader Joe as well.
Exactly. So for all those who didn't get there, I'm sure there's tons more questions. And Ilana's been a superstar here. She's just answering all these questions. But if you didn't get your questions answered in today's session, don't forget, we do have the Zoom breakout. John will be there along with Ilana to answer any other questions you may have. So the link is posted right there for you guys to visit. But that's all we have here today. And I want to thank you again, John. You've been such a great person to interact with. You've answered all of our questions, and it was a fantastic presentation. And I look forward to welcoming you again next year. So good luck for this year.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye.